Now that we have the presidential election behind us, do you think we're on a path to unity, or are we stuck in the Great Divide? The Harris Poll conducted a survey for the American Psychological Association right before the election. Of the adults they questioned, 77% said that the future of our nation was a significant source of stress in their lives. That's a lot of stressed people. Now, you've heard me say time and time again that we need to treat each other with dignity and respect regardless of our political views. I realize that's easier said than done for some folks. Tonight, a look at the Great Divide that we all need to work on closing, from those who want their states to secede to those who struggle with family conflict. Let's start with Xavier.
Growing up, I would describe my dad as a far leftist and my mom as a liberal. They often viewed everything through the lens of race. We were in Southside Chicago until we moved to Pontiac, Illinois. That town was 95% white and only had about 10,000 people there. It made it really hard for me to find myself because living in this town that's majority white, I always felt like I was too black for the white kids. I started leaning into Black Lives Matter and all these different Marxist belief systems. In that process, I was shocked by how much I ended up dismantling the entire narrative that I had been indoctrinated with. If you see color, you're racist. If you don't see color, you're ignoring racism, which is somehow still racist. And then you're told to embrace other cultures, but don't participate or it's cultural appropriation. And it's sad because we have more in common than we don't. In 2021, I started speaking out on my new beliefs as a conservative. The backlash was immediate. My progressive friends wanted nothing to do with me. People at my old church were saying that I sold my soul to Satan, and I had family members saying that I became a KKK member and a white supremacist. My father and I started having so many disagreements that we didn't speak for over 2 years. It was devastating to realize that I couldn't even go to my own family members simply because of my political beliefs. I even looked into hiring security the first time I went back home. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not called a race traitor or a sellout or a grifter.
Well, Xavier, it's good to have you here again. You were here once before when we were talking about student loans. You say the church said you sold your soul to Satan.
Yes, there were some childhood friends of mine that I grew up with in church, and I was catching up with one of the friends in that group, and she was letting me know that a lot of the mutual friends we had in that group are now saying that I sold my soul and that I was this evil, bigoted person, all because I was no longer progressive.
And there were people that you said you had been very close to and that you loved, and you just no longer existed to those people.
Absolutely. I mean, even family members. We haven't spoken in 3 years now. The first time I saw him, he looked me right in the eye and turned right around. Wants nothing to do with me because of my new political beliefs. A lot of my closest friends have the same energy towards me now.
You've been labeled homophobe, white supremacist, anti-black. How do they know that?
They don't know it. They make assumptions. They take everything that I say and take it to the extreme. If I put any kind of criticism out there, let's say about something like Black Lives Matter, then they will take that narrative and they will run with it and say that I'm anti-black and that I'm a white supremacist because I don't support this group that has been exposed numerous times for being fraudulent. And I just sit there and I wonder, how could I be a white supremacist? How would that benefit me? And I
was kind of wondering that myself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, in their mind, they think I've sold my soul, that I'm bought and paid for, and that I'm just collecting checks to be out here for the demise of black people.
You've had multiple death threats. At least 3 times you've had your life threatened.
Just this morning, I actually received one. There's been a few this year that were very specific, where people were trying to post my address online and putting out a plan to come and try to kill me. But luckily, nothing has happened.
If you're being honest, you haven't just shaken this off. It's actually gotten to you some.
Absolutely. I mean, especially in the beginning. So 3 years ago is when I started publicly saying my views as a conservative. And back then it was very hard. I knew that I was going to get pushback, but I never would have imagined the magnitude of the backlash that I've been receiving over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So it's been concerning, but I definitely want to say that I do not live in fear because I know that I'm protected by my God and my Glock. So keep it cordial.
Well, we're going to talk some more, and we're going to add a woman who says she was nearly killed for just having a Democratic bumper sticker on her car. Now, we're going to meet her after the break. Why are you so afraid to show your face and publicly identify as a Democrat? Every notification on your phone announces another wave, a hurricane threatening lives, an East Coast labor strike threatening our supply chain, an international conflict threatening our peace, or an assassination attempt threatening our democracy. Supply chains for medications can be unreliable, but there's a way to feel safer in this uncertain world. Please research how to get your own supply of medications in case of a small or more significant emergency. I urge you to invest in a JACE case today. It's an emergency medication kit containing life-saving antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You'll fill out a simple online evaluation and customize your case to include add-ons like ivermectin, EpiPens, and more. The time to prepare is right now. Mention my name and you can receive a discount on your JACE case. Just go to jace.com and enter promo PHIL at checkout. That's promo code PHIL at jace.com. Get the right meds the moment you need them.
I think people are fearful at this point because of their political affiliation. It's not safe to talk about who you identify with unless you already know those people.
So I don't really speak politics with any of my family or my friends or anything like that.
People who are best friends, who find out that they believe in this, they believe in that, and then it's hammer time.
I had a get together with my nephews and nieces, and I did say, we will not talk about politics, because there is several siblings that over Facebook, social media, they have been fighting. It's ridiculous what it has done to the family. It has just been, are you Republican? Are you Democrat? Where's the love in that?
My next guest, Marie, says she has been harassed and nearly killed for proudly displaying her political affiliation as a Democrat. She says she is so scared of being retaliated against for speaking out about being a member of the left that she has asked us to protect her identity. So we've done that. Now, why are you so afraid to show your face and publicly identify as a Democrat? Because millions of people do.
I live in a rural area that's very red, probably 10% Democrats. All my neighbors are Republican, and we get along fine. However, if they knew I was on the show and talking about issues that Democrats face in red areas, it would be very easy for someone who saw me to simply open up the gate to my ranch and let my livestock out. I'm not willing to take the chance that something could happen to my animals because this is not their fight.
And you say you've actually been run off the road on 4 different occasions?
Yes.
Because you had stickers on your car?
Yes. People coming in and forcing me physically off the road. In 2018, if somebody saw a Democratic sticker and they disagreed with you politically in the car, they may refuse to let you merge or, keep you from getting in. But that isn't the case anymore. Now it's more intimidation tactics.
You said a man confronted you, said your husband should train you better?
Yeah.
Boy, they should never say that to my wife. I don't care what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You've had your pamphlets ripped up.
We don't even try to talk to people at the door anymore because it may not be safe. I had a block walker. She was 17 and put a door hanger on a door, didn't knock, didn't make any noise. And the gentleman inside came out and chased her. She was running to her car. She got inside and he started pounding on it and screaming about her being a Democrat and to stay out of his neighborhood. And so that was potentially a very dangerous situation.
And who do you attribute this to? Do you think it's all coming from the Republicans? Do you think Democrats do any of this type thing?
I can't speak to that because I don't know.
You haven't heard of anything from your side?
About them harassing Republicans? Yeah. No, I have not.
We've looked at political fear just for both sides. And what we found out is 62% of all Americans are scared to share their political views. And it's 52% of Democrats are afraid, but 77% of Republicans are afraid to share their views.
I think that has everything to do with where you live. And I don't know where that survey was done. You and I both know that some surveys are better than others.
So you discount that?
I think that If you're a Republican and you live in a very blue area, then you are going to be reluctant to share your views. But I think that if you're a Democrat in a red state or a red area, you are going to experience the reverse. I can only speak to my own experience and what's been happening to people I know.
So you don't think that one side has a monopoly on harassing the other side?
Some of the Republican rhetoric is dangerous.
Just can't acknowledge that it's both sides.
I guess I can't. The rhetoric coming out of the top Republican leaders is very different than what the top Democrats are saying.
I'm not saying it's one side or the other. I'm saying it's both sides.
Yeah.
All right, next, a former teacher who claims he was fired for standing up for his conservative beliefs. We'll add him to the conversation after the break. Are you overwhelmed with back taxes or unfiled returns? Well, you don't have to face them alone. Tax Network USA is here to help. Tax Network USA, the nation's premier tax relief firm, has negotiated over $1 billion in tax relief for clients. Our services include penalty forgiveness, hardship programs, and offer in compromise solutions for lump sum settlements. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, our experts are ready to assist you. Even if you're behind on taxes due to missing personal or business records, Tax Network USA can guide you through the process. Protect your financial security with guidance from Tax Network USA. Our experts provide strategic advice on reducing or eliminating your tax debt. To schedule a complimentary consultation, call 1-800-958-1000. Visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil. Don't let the IRS's aggressive tactics control your life. Empower yourself with Tax Network USA's support and take charge of your financial future. Visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil today.
I have definitely had friends that are Republican, but they were afraid to say that they were because they get a lot of backlash. And sometimes if you're Republican, they'll, blacklist you.
I would say I'm not super happy about telling people that I'm a Democrat because most people that I work with and my whole family are Republicans, so it's not a comfortable conversation to have with them. There's always going to be some kind of argument.
I do feel like I'm heavily discriminated when I say I'm a Republican. My friends that are Democrats will not consider my opinion. Absolutely not. I've even heard of a new dating thing that if you're a Republican and the person you're going out with for the first time is Democrat, you may as well just forget about it because it'll never work.
My next guest, Jonathan, claims he knows what it feels like to be canceled for having a strong political view because he claims it cost him his job as a teacher.
In 2020, the mask mandates started, and after about a week, I realized I was not for that. As a teacher, they gave me an option to get a mask exemption. Getting that mask exemption made a lot of people raise their eyebrows at me. Over the next few months, I'm starting to notice things that I think do not belong in the schools. I'm seeing Black Lives Matter posters. Kids are talking about communism in a positive light. We have the gay club gets approved, but then the church club got denied. The child told me not to refer to her as a her. She was non-binary. And I'm like, what is a non-binary? I'm teaching in a school with young teenagers, and all their conversations are hyper-political and all about racism when they're growing up in a time where there's less racism than there's ever been. This was absolutely bonkers. I decided to go to a school board meeting and I showed all the parents in my community this particular program. I played the video of this liberal, left-leaning, cultural Marxist ideology that was in the videos.
They're teaching incorrect grammar to give a kid whatever gender pronoun they want.
After the school board meeting, I was nervous. A few months later, I am fired. Everybody on the internet knows who I am and they've got crazy labels. Crazy teacher, the psycho teacher, whatever you could put in front of teacher, they did. In the entire education community, I'd say I was blacklisted.
Well, Jonathan, you say you are a perfect example of how easy it is to be canceled for standing up for what you think, feel, and believe.
Oh, absolutely.
And they didn't say that, but it happened.
I mean, look, let's just be real. I said something, people didn't like it, and then I was fired. Anytime you bring attention to something that makes people look bad, people get scared. In America, we've got the First Amendment. I used my freedom of speech to talk about things that I thought were extremely inappropriate in the schools, And then a lot of parents all of a sudden became interested in their children's education because they said, OMG, I didn't know my kids were being exposed to this kind of content in Southeast Louisiana, stuff we had seen maybe in California or New York or in other cities, other states, but it was in Southeast Louisiana and the parents flipped out. And so that put a lot of pressure on the school board. Now, it's a hyper-political subject. There's a lot of hypersensitivity. People are emotionally weak right now. They get offended at everything. And sometimes people think the best PR move is to shut somebody up, when in reality, that may not be the case.
And you were listening to what Xavier was saying when he made some of the changes or declarations that he made. People had a strong reaction to it.
Oh, no, that's perfectly understandable. I mean, the difference is if somebody accuses me of being the KKK, it makes more sense to him because, you get what I'm saying.
Obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say the left are attacking the First Amendment. Is it the content or just your right to speak up?
You have the right to speak up if you agree with the left. I have many friends who have gone to college universities to speak. Democrat-type kids come, they protest, they get violent, the police have to be called. But if we see a left figure go to a university, we don't see this massive protest. So, yeah, freedom of speech if you're on the left, but not on the right.
Do y'all have friends on the left?
I do.
Do you?
I play pickleball. So in pickleball, you don't ask about politics. So I would assume some of them are probably Democrats. So the answer to that is yeah.
Maybe that's what we need, is everybody start playing pickleball.
I can learn.
Yeah, okay. All right. It was interesting, as I was talking to Marie, she had a hard time saying that the left contributes to this. So it's interesting that both are accusing the other of the same things.
Yeah, and the traffic thing, I purposely don't put stickers on because I know people will target certain stickers depending on where you're at in the country. But
I didn't know we still had bumper stickers.
Well,
do we still have bumpers?
Not in my generation. We don't have bumper stickers.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
And I don't want to downplay anything that she said because that is her personal experience. But if we're going to be honest, I think it's pretty disingenuous to even pretend like there is equal amount of backlash when you come out as a leftist or a Democrat than there is when you're a Republican. When you are publicly a Republican or conservative, you are canceled, and people will often tell you that you are this hateful person by default without knowing anything about you. You're a leftist, they just assume you're a liberal or that you might dye your hair blue at some point. Like, it's not nearly as extreme on that side as it is on our side. We, for the most part, allow the left to do what they want to do as long as it doesn't affect children and start to get into the school systems. That's when we start to take issue.
We have more in common than we do differences among us all. And if we'll just say, hey, I'm not right all the time. I got to be willing to listen. I often say you don't have to agree with everything somebody says or does to love that person. You just don't. We've got to stop being right fighters and start working towards solutions. We're in the greatest country in the world, and it's ours to lose. So coming up next, a look at those who want to break up these United States. Is secession a real threat? We'll look at that next. Christmas is the perfect time to share the gift of comfort and luxury with your loved ones. Cozy Earth makes it easy with their bamboo sheet set, a true holiday favorite. These sheets are ultra soft, breathable, and guaranteed not to pill for 10 years, ensuring restful nights and serene escapes every day. Cozy Earth stretch knit bamboo pajama sets for men and women are another can't-miss gift this season. They're perfect for unwinding at home, offering unmatched comfort and style for those treasured moments of relaxation. Cozy Earth is all about transforming your space into a sanctuary of tranquility. Their responsibly made temperature-regulating, durable fabrics make every product a thoughtful investment in comfort. Order by December 13th for free shipping or by December 20 with expedited delivery. Head to CozyEarth.com/Phil and use code Phil for up to 40% off. Give the gift of luxury this holiday season. Tonight, our great nation feels more divided maybe than ever. So divided, in fact, that secession movements States wanting to break away from the U.S. completely are growing faster than you might think. So are we on the verge of becoming the disunited states of America? My first guest, Dan, says he supports Texas becoming its own nation after his life was changed forever by a tragic event.
I couldn't have asked for a better son than what I got with Spencer. When he was 25, he was getting ready to open his new music store. The night before the grand opening of Spencer's store, a 4-time deported illegal alien that had a long criminal history just pulled up next to Spencer and randomly blew Spencer's brains out. I became very politically involved to try to get something done so other American families wouldn't be subjected to what my family was subjected to. After years of trying to get our federal government to live up to their end of the social contract, I've come to the conclusion that that's a lost cause. And then a few years ago, Daniel Miller turned me on to the Texas nationalist movement. At first, it seemed pretty far-fetched that Texas would leave the Union. But the more I saw the corruption in D.C., it began to make sense. It's time for Texas to fix its own problems and for Washington to get out of the way. I don't want to spend my tax dollars on people like the one that killed my son. Why should Texas be shackled to a government that is working against Texas interests?
First off, I'm very, very sorry for your loss. As a father of 2 boys, and one of them being a musician as well, this one really hit home. I'll never tell you I know how you feel.
Well, I appreciate that. And what's different about it than another type of death, the scab continues to be ripped off when you see every day the way the federal government is treating immigration. And it really leaves you with the feeling of, I guess your son was worth nothing.
And this continues to happen. I've talked to other parents within the last month who have lost children to immigrants that have come across illegally. Some of them 2, 3, 4 times, and murdered their child. When you read about this, see on the news, it's got to take you back as though it's happening all over again.
Yeah, it conjures up all those same feelings. My son's murderer had been deported 4 times. He had a 15-year nasty rap sheet, assaults, robberies. He did 5 years in prison for attempted murder. He just thumbed his nose at our immigration laws for a 5th time, set up shop in Houston, and on January 31st of 2015, at a red light, he just randomly, for fun, blew my son's brains out. And he took out 2 other motorists. He was high on cocaine and alcohol, and he just out fun shooting. Simple as that. So I became very politically involved.
You began to subscribe to the ideology set forth in Texas, which is Texas seceding from the United States and functioning as its own country.
Right. Yeah, around about that time when I started getting disillusioned with this, a friend said, you need to read this Texas book. And I went in it as a skeptic, but I read the book, and by the time I finished it, I couldn't poke any holes in it. Mm-hmm. And it started to make a lot of sense to me. This is a very peaceful movement, and I'm down with that. I think that violence is a non-starter.
Right. Well, the author of that book is actually here, and Dan says our next guest should become the president of the Republic of Texas.
August 24th, 1996. That was the date that I made a personal decision to dedicate my life to seeing Texas as a free, independent, self-governing, sovereign nation among nations. And from that time to this, there has never been a time where we are closer to Texas happening.
Well, I'm back with Dan, who joined the Texas Nationalist Movement, or Texit, after his son was murdered by an illegal immigrant. Also joining us is Daniel, who is considered the modern-day founder of the Texas Nationalist Movement, or Texit as it's called. You actually wrote a book about this, and your life is dedicated to fighting for Texas independence. Fair statement?
I would say that's fair. 1996,
I made the decision to work to see Texas become an independent nation.
And why that solution instead of working within the system?
Well, I tried that. It is very clear that the federal government is unfixable. Because if you think back to how long, every 2 to 4 years, we get paraded by some political messiah who's going to reduce the debt, end federal overreach, to shrink the government. But what have we seen? We've seen the exact opposite thing happen. At what point do you begin to look at the federal debt and say, well, look, this is fiscal child abuse. You know, this is going to be something that we're going to crush our children with. You know, how many Spencers do we have to have before we say we have to do something different? And ultimately, that's what it was. It was a realization that the federal government was unfixable. We simply want the right to govern ourselves. Look, this has been done 140 other times over the last 70 to 80 years. Well, why not us? You know, how is it that those countries are so much better than us that they can govern themselves? They can control their own border and immigration. They can have their own military and defense policy, their own currency and tax
Okay, well, hold it. You're leaving out a big part of the story, though. How many of those that have declared themselves sovereign is it working out for?
It's not always a happy ending, but you have to look at where a lot of those folks started from, right? A lot of those places were not set and suitable, but here we are in Texas. We have the 8th largest economy in the world. If Texas can't make it as an independent nation, then who can?
And if this happens, do you see any problems associated with it?
I don't see any problems. Do we have challenges? Sure, but don't we have challenges now?
Yeah. And you rightly state that Texas is huge in terms of their economy. Texas is $1.59 trillion, 10th in the world. How much of that money comes from the federal government?
If you listen to the pundits and the pollsters, particularly of the progressive variety, they will tell you that Texas can't survive without federal money. But when you take the federal pension benefits out of the equation, what you end up with is Texas overpaying anywhere from $103 to $160 billion annually into the federal system.
Do you in any way think that you're trading one government for another government, that you're not going to have a lot of the same issues with a government as big as the one that Texas or California would have? I mean, come on, human nature is what it is.
Look, we're not promising utopia, but what we do have that is different than our arrangement that we have with Washington, D.C., is we have a say in it.
You're acting like you have some new system that you aren't going to have bureaucrats in there. Are you kidding me?
You're going to have government, but you're not going to have 2.5 million unelected federal bureaucrats with 440 separate agencies.
Yeah, you have a lot of buts in your argument, and but means forget what I just said. I'm now going to tell you what I really mean. You're going to be facing the same situation you're facing there, just on a smaller scale with fewer resources.
Well, but we have a say in the matter.
All right, next, a woman who says the federal government is rotten, corrupt, and failing to serve the will of the people. How she's working for secession in her home state.
In 2008, I moved to New Hampshire to be with a bunch of like-minded libertarians. It was an amazing experience, and I love it there. Over the next 4 years, I discovered that there was an appetite amongst Granite Staters for independence. So then we thought, can we peacefully secede from the U.S.? And how would we do that? We started the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, and its mission is to secede from the U.S. government. We all understand now the system is broken. Undeclared wars, too much money printing, the inflation, it's not sustainable. New Hampshire citizens pay more in federal taxes to the government than we get back. And that obviously is not really a sustainable model, and why would we sign up for it? If New Hampshire was its own country, we would be a prosperous little country. Geographically, we'd be bigger than countries in Europe. Population-wise, we'd be 4 times the size of Iceland. We'd be able to export energy. New Hampshire has a nuclear plant that no one talks about. We have a deep sea port. So in some ways, New Hampshire could become like a little Hong Kong to the whole eastern seaboard, where we're more prosperous than we could be under the federal government.
Does it ever seem a little far-fetched to you, or do you really feel like this can and is going to happen?
I believe it's not if, but when. And I think a lot of that is just tied to the unsustainable federal debt. I mean, we're $34 trillion in debt, and there is just no way we're going to be able to pay that off. So I think we're looking at a dollar collapse, and if that's the case, let's come up with solutions to the problem.
We can't just keep printing money because that cheapens everybody's money, and I agree with you. I just don't necessarily agree with the solution, because I think it's fraught with problems that can make it unworkable. Now, you say the idea of secession would work. You think you may be 20 years early?
You know, I mean, everything takes time, right? The fact that we're having these discussions is the start of it. I'm solution-driven, and I'm saying, look, if these are the problems that we cannot solve, and Dr. Phil, no one here can tell us one thing that has been reformed in the federal government in the past 50 years. So when people say to me, but we need to fix it in DC, I'm like, how? How are we supposed to fix it? It is unfixable. It is corrupt and rotten, and it cannot be fixed. So what we need to do is we need to go back to smaller locales, more localism, so that, you know what, you asked about, well, you know, we're just gonna have another government in DC or in Texas or in New Hampshire, say, but that government will be smaller, it will be less corrupt, and there's a more direct line between you as a citizen and your legislators.
Now, journalist and political commentator Laura Wellington says, if we're not careful, this country could very well be on the brink of a second civil war.
The United States of America is headed towards a civil war. And people believe the civil war can happen within the next, 5 years, so 2029. I think to say it can't happen now is very naive. Of course it can happen. We're on shaky ground right now. There are several indicators why I think a civil war will happen. The first thing, our government is ruling as if it's a dictatorship. And no one is talking about this, but this is really important. Our government has collapsed our nation on top of itself through the economy. That's right out of Marxism. They're just throwing money away. And what's happening is they're giving mass entitlements. The second is called ethnic entrepreneurship. Politicians have weaponized our differences.
I feel like we're getting stuff forced on us that we really don't have too much to do with, and they're trying to divide us and trying to cause a civil war, which is total BS.
Well, the border's a big one. You see illegal immigration coming in. Who's getting all that money? It happened in Germany with the Muslims. The Germans are up in arms because all of the Social Security that they're supposed to get and they worked for are being given to the Muslims because there's so many Muslims came into their country. Right now, the debt we have in this country, it takes more of our money than any other part of our budget. The debt. The amount of pressure that's putting on the United States as a whole it can create the tipping point. I think that if we don't right this ship right now, then we will certainly no longer have a country.
You wrote that a civil war is coming before 2030. Why?
Because all the markers that are out there that are dictating where we are and where we're heading is showing that that's what's going to happen. These are the markers that the CIA uses to determine whether or not civil wars will break out in other countries. And given application to our own country, we're highly likely to have a civil war by 2029.
What are the biggest markers?
The biggest markers are, one, the overall collapse of the country in on itself economically. Two, the fact that we are no longer a constitutional republic, that we are half democracy, half dictatorship. And three, that our political leaders have weaponized our differences for their own political gain. And when you factor all those in, that spells civil war for us.
What part is dictatorship?
Look at the country, how it's being run. I mean, all you have to do is watch how much money has been given to Ukraine when people are starving and having a hard time Very few actually say that this country is working for them. Who is it working for? Who is it working for today?
For the swamp.
For the
Kleptocrats
for
in
the
D.C.
swamp.
So what are the realities of secession? Should we be worried about a second civil war?
Secession is clearly becoming a more prominent part of our politics. I think it is likely that a state could move in the next several decades to hold a vote on whether its citizens want to leave the Union. However, there are so many hurdles in the path of a successful secession movement. First of all, there is a very powerful national mythology of American unity. We are the United States of America. I think a lot of people would have a hard time getting behind such a movement. There's a huge question about whether secession is even legal or constitutional in the United States. This is what the first Civil War was fought over, and it's unlikely that the federal government would simply let a state go. There are all kinds of practical questions that would have to be worked out related to currency, land, federal property, the federal debt, military installations, any number of practical obstacles in the way of a state leaving. There's no point in pretending we're not as divided as we are. I think what all the talk of secession and civil war really means is that we're truly fundamentally divided, and that is what we should be paying attention to.
Well, Richard Kreitner joins us now, and he is the author of Break It Up, Secession, Division, and the Secret History of America's Imperfect Union. What are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
I think I disagree with quite a lot. You know, to say that we're in a dictatorship and to cite as evidence for that people are waving Ukrainian flags, or just a disagreement about what we do with our tax dollars, you know, military spending or foreign aid or something versus stuff at home, that's a normal, everyday political dispute. I think there's also a serious kind of underestimation of the obstacles to secession. Texas does have the 8th largest economy. Would it have the 8th largest economy the day after leaving the United States? I really don't think so. I also think there's an element that we should talk about, which is that this is what Russia wants. You know, Russia is a master of disinformation, and over the last 8 years has seized on every little blip of secession talk. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about secession. I wrote an entire book about it. I think we should. But we can't talk about this outside the context of how foreign powers, foreign adversaries have looked at this idea of disunion throughout the centuries, and look at it now.
Well, I think there's no question what you're saying is right. This kind of thing is certainly pushed by foreign governments. They love to hear us talk about this. They love dissension. So what's your cautionary tale about this?
I think the biggest one is this claim that it could happen peacefully. The same claim was made by Southerners, by Confederates in the 1850s, 1860, 1861. There was one Southern politician who even said that he would personally drink up every drop of blood that was shed in a conflict with the federal government. He didn't do that because 700,000 people died.
Yeah, 700,000 military died, plus civilians.
I think we have a duty as humans who are looking at this issue and grappling with these questions to not come to the table with the notion of civil war. But if we actually go in with the lens of this isn't working, how can we peacefully get out of this relationship?
I feel that's very idealistic.
Sure.
Well,
Well, we don't live in an idealistic society.
Because people don't behave properly.
Right. You just made my point.
No,
that's why it's not
but
going to
that's
work.
why it behooves us to do something better. I mean, if you're going to come to the table and be like, yo, I'm going to kill you if you don't do what I say, that doesn't seem like a great way to come to a better solution.
And I mean, I want you to think about this, right? So the big advocacy here is for Texans to have a referendum on this issue. What we want is a fair, open discussion that culminates in a vote where people actually go and get to vote. And what the contention is that if Texans or people in New Hampshire or any other state vote wrong, then the 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats and President Peepaw are going to get on the red phone and they're going to come carpet bomb Walmart in Houston, Texas. And it's like, wait a minute. If we're ascribing that sort of behavior, if we're failing to act on our right of self-government because that's the fear, then what does that tell us about Washington, D.C.? That they're going to behave like North Korea or Syria or any of these other dictatorships? I mean, what does that say about them?
But let me point something out. That kind of argument is reckless. To use that kind of analogy. That's ridiculous.
But that's literally the case that they made.
That's not what I mean by violence. I'm not saying that the federal government would or should. I would certainly be against. I'm not going to war to keep you in the union. There's no way.
Thank
you. know,
can I get that in writing?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm nobody, but yes. What I'm saying is the North, the Union, Abraham Lincoln did not fire the first shot in the Civil War.
Understand.
It happened over federal property that there was a serious disagreement about whose it was going to be.
Right.
I can see something like that happening again. It's spiraling out of your control and everybody else's.
That's why I say this is reckless and premature conversation.
But Dr. Fu, let me ask you, 3 years ago, we introduced a constitutional amendment which would allow Granite Staters, New Hampshiremen, to vote on whether they want to stay in the Union. It was 2 sentences. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it got shot down. We had 13 legislators voted for it. 13 out of 400, that wasn't great. But then we brought it back based on what people told us they wanted to hear. So the second time we introduced it with a $40 trillion cap. So we said there's a triggering event. If the federal government's debt reaches $40 trillion, then we will take this vote to the citizens of the state, right? And we'll let the people decide. We, the people, get to decide. And that seems eminently reasonable to me. We also, based on the feedback we heard from people, tried to introduce a study committee so that when we start to grapple with these difficult questions, how would it work? You know, where would I get my Social Security? Well, people in Mexico still receive their Social Security. So if there's an appetite,
People that have seceded Texas are not getting Social Security.
Well, you know what? I've got news for you. No one's going to get their Social Security at the rate we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a better idea in my humble but perfectly accurate opinion. Why don't we fix the country we have? We only have the best track record in the history of the world. Has anyone noticed that all of this divisiveness we keep talking about is as much within states as between states? So you would be taking your problems with you when you break off. A wise man I know says, we have issues. So let's define them and fix them. We're not nearly as different and divided as the echo chambers of the internet, social media, and cable TV news make it sound. Thank you for being here. Good night.